He didn't know me. That means like so much to me. No matter what I do, like no matter who I work with, who I speak to, like that will always be so special. And I never went into like the interview thinking, oh my God, this could be a potential career path. It's all asking, because if you ask and they say no, then that's okay. If you work hard and you're truly passionate about it, then there's nothing saying that it won't work out. These conversations are the ones that could empower other people.
Ellie, thank you very much for coming on the Fine Margins podcast. I guess the best place to start before we jump in is just for you to give a little introduction to yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm Ellie. I'm still at uni. I'm in that final year of my undergrad degree, studying mass communication at Northumbria. And on the side, I do like quite a bit of work in motorsport. I'm a freelance motorsport writer, so I do like independent project work, like my own bits, and then work on certain projects with like different names in the industry, which is really cool. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the brief overview of like who I am and like what I do and things like that.
Yeah, I actually think you're doing a massive discredit to yourself, because me being me, I obviously stalked you and your website and your LinkedIn before we came in. So Ellie is like massively underselling herself. She has her own website, which is Ellie Does F1, which has some amazing content on all of the areas of motorsports and some really interesting interviews, as well as her own pieces. She is a freelance writer for the W Series, which is unbelievable considering you're still at university, and we're going to talk about how that happened. To my knowledge, you're doing work with MotorMouth podcast team internally.
Yeah,
how did that happen?
I think it was Harry who kind of messaged me at the time. I mean, obviously, this is the thing. I always say this to people, like, doing this with uni is like really difficult, because obviously, especially now being in like my final year, like my dissertation has to be like the priority, because that's like it just signifies the end of like uni, the end of 3 years. But it was Harry, I think, Harry Benjamin, who is part of the MotorMouth team with Tim, and he just messaged and was like, we're looking kind of to maybe expand things a bit, like in terms of like the written content, because obviously a podcast is very much just like audio. And I was like, yeah, cool, I'd be interested. Obviously, it would be on a very like freelance base. Like it wouldn't be, you know, an article like say every week kind of thing. It would just be a kind of when and if thing. And they were kind of like, yeah, that's cool. So yeah, I've worked on a couple of podcast episodes, just kind of bringing them alive in like written form. So taking like the story, the conversation from the podcast, and then turning it into like an article, like an interview style kind of articles. So obviously there's like a bit of background, then a few quotes, then it kind of goes on like that, like telling the story of Mario Andretti and then everyone's favourite Gunther Steiner. That was a really cool episode to kind of like dig into, and Mario as well, to be fair, because like I didn't really know that much about him. Obviously with like Drive to Survive and how big like Haas have become because of Gunther in that series, like it was cool to like look at that. And then I've also done some interview bits for them. Things have been kind of quiet recently, obviously, with me kind of working on other projects, and it's really hard to like divide that time, because I would sit and work on like motorsport projects all the time if I could, but obviously I have to be like, Ellie, like you need to get your degree first. Like that's obviously like the most important part. Do you know what I mean?
It's like I'm doing uni part-time, but really I work in motorsports. Like
it's like this degree is part-time with a little asterisk, and it's like, you know, actually full-time. Yeah. Doesn't feel like it's, because I'm very like, I've always enjoyed, it sounds really cringe, but like I've always enjoyed like uni and like studying and learning new things. And uni's given me the options and the opportunities to learn more. Like I've done loads of like motorsport pieces, but then I've also done pieces like on TV and like film festivals and stuff. So like I've done so much.
Yeah.
And it's like a home straight, right?
Yeah.
So like I would love to sit and transcribe all these interviews and get them all out like straight away, but it's just not viable.
There's so much there, and I want to talk about like, you know, doing that kind of your own thing at uni, and how others maybe can get into that. But why don't we go like way back to the big question? How did you become engrossed in motorsports?
Yeah, I've always grown up in like a sport-loving family. It's always been the main kind of sport in my family. Always supported Newcastle. Like on Sundays, I would go to my grandma's for my Sunday dinner, and then there'd be football on, so I would watch it. I never really took like an interest in it at school. I was never really like I hated PE. Like PE was just the worst. In 2018, I just kind of fell into F1, like started watching it a bit more, was like, okay. So it was like before Drive to Survive came out.
Yeah.
So I kind of got like that background of what was happening in the 2018 season. Obviously before like George, Lando and Alex came in. 2019 was the first full season that I watched. I think you'd probably agree, like when Drive to Survive started, nobody ever imagined it would be like how big it's become.
Yeah.
And everyone did just see it as like a behind the scenes kind of thing. Liberty, they'd only been in for what, like a year and a bit by that.
Yeah.
So we hadn't seen the full extent of like new social strategies and all that kind of thing, which now when you think about it and look back, like it's so different and it's like, changed so much. So yeah, it was kind of before then when I got into it properly.
And what do you love about it?
I don't know because it's just...
I actually have no idea. I just watch it.
There's nothing else on the telly. Like, no, but like there's so many good things about it. Like it's hard to like pick one thing. I don't know. When I was little, my friend, big up, her mum and dad were big F1 fans, and I'd go to hers on a Sunday, and mum and dad would be like, "Do you want to come watch the Grand Prix?" And I'd be like, "No, it's boring."
No.
But now I'm like, yeah, I can't miss a race.
If you think now about like how maybe other people that don't watch F1 view the sport, and what do you think of the things that people don't see until they get into it? What are some stuff that is pretty sick, but maybe only some kind of OG fans would know that like keeps things interesting?
You know, like there's that discussion where it's like, oh, girls only watch F1 because of the hot drivers, right? Like that preconception. And I don't know if that's because it's like ever since F1 started, it's been like so male dominated, and that's not a secret. Like, you know, we're seeing more diversity, representation in the sport and things, but at its core, it still is quite male dominated. And I think people come in with a preconception of that, and that kind of fogs their kind of vision on it and makes it a bit like blurry, I suppose. And, you know, I learn new things about F1 all the time.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh my God, I've been a fan for like a few years now. Like I know everything about it. Idea where it's like, if you don't know who won the 1970 like world championship to like every single engineer, then you're not a real fan. I don't know every single rule. But in F1, it seems like the continuum is like totally different to like other sports.
But I think also F1 has fundamentally changed. We're in an era of sport where being good at a sport isn't actually enough. You need to have a whole personality to go with that. And that's a whole different thing, right? Is that fair for the athletes that they have that pressure? No, but you know, this was an era of Drive to Survive where it wasn't just about the cars. It was about the team principles. It was about the drivers. So like this concept of like, well, if you didn't know what happened in F1 40 years ago, it's kind of like, well, F1's a different sport. Like my kind of favorite thing about the sport, which actually someone else told me, and then I was like, this is my favorite thing, is how like everybody thinks like maybe an engineer or is like a boring job where it's just about like, it's very like there's a method and that's it. And then actually engineering is probably one of the most creative things ever. And I think we saw that with this year's regulation, how such different cars were produced for the same concepts, and like how innovation is driven and how they update that on like a weekly basis, which is nearly impossible. Interesting.
When you're watching it on telly or when you're seeing things on social media, like you're not seeing like everyone behind the scenes. There's so much more to an F1 team. So like the 10 F1 teams that we'll have on the grid, there's so much more to that. And then there's also so much more to like the broadcasting side of things, and you know how that works. Like you have like so many people, you have the cameramen, you have the people working in like the gallery and things. And I spoke to Alex Jakes last year we talked about like safety in motorsport and things, and he was saying like when he's commentating on like a crash or an incident, whatever the severity, like there's always people who are giving him the information, and there are so many more people behind. Like, he's a commentator. You don't actually see his face. You hear his voice, you don't see his face, but you don't actually realise that behind that commentator, there are so many more. There's the head of comms who are kind of getting information from teams who might be involved in incidents, and then you've got people who are like in the gallery, like watching this accident back over and over again, which can be so hard depending on the severity of the incident. Like that was something he said. He was saying, you know, on Telly Live, on Sky Sports or whatever it might be you watch it on, you might see a replay once and then they won't replay it again until we know people are safe. And, you know, there's that whole discussion which came out after incident in Bahrain, which was a massive thing as well. And he was saying, but there's people in the gallery who who are there in charge of, you know, TV direction and so on, and they have to watch this accident over and over again. There are so many people behind the scenes who actually like have to do some like really difficult things, because that must be so difficult. People don't realize that behind the pit crew, behind the engineers you see in the garage, behind the people on the pit wall, there are so many more people, and a lot of those people as well are women. And it comes back to the discussion of if they're in media facing roles, and unless we give them the platform, so like talk about what they're doing within an F1 team or whatever, how are people actually ever going to?
I totally agree. But, and I love like where this conversation is going, I want to talk about what you've done and how your journey started and getting yourself to the position where you are now working with basically 3 entities within the motorsport space, and how that happened, and also how that happened so young and alongside university.
But even further, writing's always kind of been something that I've enjoyed. When I was younger, I would always be writing stories and making like little magazines on Word, and then being like, you have to give me £1 to read this magazine that I've made, you know, because I was a clever businesswoman when
I love that monetization. Please teach me.
And then I kind of was like, okay, maybe journalism isn't for me. Fair enough. I've studied media since like GCSE level. So I did GCSE A level and obviously now at uni. And initially I wanted to go into music. So my initial plan was do my GCSEs and then go to college and do music full time. Because music, again, is also something that I've been really interested in ever since I was little. Like growing up, I've grown up with bands and going different places and all that kind of thing. Studying media was kind of always a potential possibility as well. Because in my head, I was like, I might not necessarily be like really successful if I do music. Like, would I really want to go and study music at a degree level? Like, is that really like my kind of calling? And yeah, something just kind of clicked and I was like, I would still like to study music at A level, but I think I also want to do media. So maybe college isn't the best like pathway for me. So I stayed at sixth form, did my A levels. And then during that summer, I was like, maybe I should create some sort of portfolio just so I can have a place for like my own stuff. If I write something every once in a while, I can upload it there, and then coming to like the end of uni, leaving, applying for jobs, at least I have something to kind of say, look, I've done a few bits, like here it is. And then I never planned to do like motorsport like completely. I was kind of going to do a bit of lifestyle, so you know, like travel and things like that, beauty. That
in COVID, that sounds like a perfect plan. Yeah,
like during COVID as well, it's not like I'd been anywhere. And I was like, yeah, okay, we'll do a bit of motorsport and whatever. And then it was Sasha Fenestras, who I obviously followed him on Twitter, and he followed me on Twitter. So I was like, okay, maybe he's kind of a good person to ask, see if he'd be interested in kind of sitting down, having a chat, whatever. So I messaged him and I was like, you know, would you be up for it? Like, I'm just looking to start like a little kind of project. Like, and he was like, oh my God, yeah, like totally up for it. It'd be great and whatever. Okay. Inside I was like, oh my God, like this is a bit mad. And now looking back, like the first 3 people that I spoke to was Sasha, Max and Oscar Piastri. And I got those interviews off my own back, just on like Twitter.
That's for asking.
I just reached out. And thankfully I had such a supportive group of friends who I'd met on Twitter during like the COVID pandemic. Obviously when all the drivers were streaming, we'd all be like sitting watching them and all that kind of thing. Thankfully I had such a supportive like group, like, and they were all for it, like helping me out and things. But yeah, going back to Sasha, we sat down, had the chat. It was really interesting and he was so lovely. And I was like, okay, this process has been fun, so maybe I'll do another one. And I did another one, and that was Max. And that conversation that we had, it still has to be one of like the best conversations I've had in this space, because he just left F3 at the time. So that was obviously a big talking point, and that got onto the topic of like mental health, which is something really important to me in this industry and just in general. And then we were talking about Antoine Hubert, who obviously he was really close with through the Renault Driver Academy. So that conversation, I was essentially a stranger. Like, we'd spoken on Twitter to like organise it and whatever. And I was essentially a stranger, and we sat for about an hour on Zoom, and he just like opened up about why he decided to leave F3. Like, you know, what that was like, what the process of like leaving was, and what the decision was like kind of came from, and what that was like for him. And then obviously losing Antoine and that kind of thing, which like, that has to be hard, you know, and like he was like, I was just a stranger, like he didn't know me, and I was just like, I don't have the kind of portfolio I do now to say, look, I've had all of these conversations. He was the second person I spoke to. And that means like so much to me. I've said this to people, like, no matter what I do, like, no matter who I work with, who I speak to, like, that will always be so special and so important to me, because it's something that's close to my heart, but also the fact that he was just so open, and like the whole conversation it was like I was speaking to someone I'd known for years. So being able to like work on that and put it out, and like, it was received so well. He hit 10,000 reads last year, and then he was in the W Series paddock when I was, so we kind of like had a conversation about it then. So it kind of came full circle. But yeah, it definitely just started out as like a passion project, just something to have, like, I could show employers, potential employers, and then it became a bit more serious.
For anybody listening and wherever they are and at whatever stage in their career, kind of what was your taking? Like, if you would say, okay, this is the lesson I learned from that I can apply, like, what do you think that would be?
Honestly, I don't know, because it just kind of happened. I wasn't expecting it to happen.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think, I never went into like the interview with Sasha thinking, oh my God, this could be a potential career path.
Yeah.
I've always been like, you know, media is for me, whether that be in advertising or marketing or comms or whatever. And that's part of the reason why I chose my degree, so I would have the options afterwards. The opportunities just kind of like appeared. And I was like, I've worked hard, so obviously I'm going to say yes and try this new thing out. You know, whether it works, it works. I learn a lesson from it at the end of the day. You know, like, if you work with someone and it goes really well, then that's a huge positive, and you're probably going to have learned something. But honestly, I would always say, like, if you're passionate about something, you just have to like roll with it.
Yeah.
It might take like 10 years. You never know. It might take a long time, but if you work hard and you're truly passionate about it, then there's nothing saying that it won't work out like how you want it to.
It's crazy because like all you did was start.
Literally.
In the sense of all you did was ask. No loss. And then it just happened. What I've at least taken from your story is kind of like, it doesn't have to be this massive thing. Like, it could be as simple as just beginning. You don't have to have a plan, and you don't have to have a 10-year strategy, but you can just have a passion and a like desire to, like, for example, have a conversation. I mean, you spoke to like notable people, and you didn't have to have like 400 articles under your belt or like a partnership with Sky Sports or, you know.
It's all about just asking, because if you ask and they say no, then that's okay. Like, you're not even upset about it, but that's not to say that if you ask again in a year's time, the answer would still be no. So that was kind of also a big thing, like, and I still think about that now. Like, I don't want to write like this forever. Like, I don't want to stick in journalism for forever. Like, working in comms is like my end goal, but I understand that I'm not going to like get there straight away. Start somewhere and just show that you can like, that you're willing to like learn and adapt, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. How did the W Series work come about and all the other opportunities that have come since then? And why did people get in touch with you?
With W Series, I'd posted on LinkedIn and said, like, I'm looking for just some like part-time roles, like, that can be remote. And then Penny Harrison, who was at W Series and is now at Mercedes, she commented, she was like, we might have an opportunity that you're interested in. Like, dropped me a message. I was like, okay, cool. Like, trying to keep it calm, like,
play it cool. It's all good.
Inside, I was actually like, okay. So yeah, I dropped her a message and I was just like, you know, like, what is it you're kind of thinking of? Like, I'd definitely be interested. And she was like, we're just looking for someone to kind of create like pieces and things like throughout the season and whatnot. I was like, yeah, we'd definitely be up for that. So yeah, we were kind of in conversation, worked on like a season preview and whatnot. And then I was like, you know, I'm already going to Silverstone. Like, why don't I just ask about getting a pass to see if I could join them in person and like see what that kind of, because it's another side, you know, like what I'd known. And again, it was just like, if they say no, like they say no. But what's the harm in trying? So I did. I was like, I'm coming down to Silverstone. Like, would there be any way I could, you know, like join you guys just to see what it's kind of like? And she was like, yeah, like, we'll sort out a path. Basically, it was just like a yes. And I was like, okay, like trying to stay calm, because at this point I'd not been doing this for 2 years. So I was like, to get to this stage like so early. And at that point, like, I'd been I'd worked with obviously females in motorsport who have a massive platform and a massive reach, and everything that I did with them was like so much fun, but it was also so inspiring to share like other women's stories, a lot of people who were in the media industry, but also people who were like working elsewhere. So to like have worked with them, and then the women I'd spoken to like for my own site, and then getting in the paddock with W Series, joining them, it was really crazy. Like, I remember I was so nervous before I went in, and I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I can do it. Like, I really don't know if I can. But then I went in and everyone was so lovely. Like, Penny was obviously there, and she was obviously the one who I'd been like in communications with. And then just other members of like the digital team who I'd kind of spoken to before as well. Everyone was so welcoming. And then, you know, it was like, go and grab some like videos and things for TikTok, like pictures for Instagram or whatever. So I made a couple of TikToks whilst I was there, like in the paddock, and then spoke to a couple of drivers, which was insane because that was like the first time I'd actually been able to like have those in person, like interview kind of scenarios, which was obviously like a learning curve as well, because it was like I'd not been exposed to that before. It was just this kind of thing where I would sit at home in my bedroom, and then the other person would be wherever in the world they might be. So being there like with my phone and my little notebook with my questions in, and like speaking to someone face to face, that was obviously like really new and really insane. It was really crazy. Like, I would just look at the past and be like how is this like real?
Yeah. And you did it all yourself, which is unbelievable.
Like, for me, just, you know, still being at uni, sometimes I feel like I should be doing more. Like, but I don't know if that's just me. I don't know if that's just the type of person I am. Like, I always have to have something on the go, or I always have to have like ideas for something, you know what I mean? I'm just that type of person. But yeah, it was insane. And then obviously seeing Max there and having that kind of conversation about the piece, he was like, I saw that it reached like 10K, like congratulations and everything. And just being able to work with like the W Series team, seeing how like it just works.
Yeah.
Seeing how that kind of like motorsport like environment is. And everyone was so lovely. You could tell how passionate everyone was about the cause that they were kind of, because everyone was there for the same reason.
How did you feel when last season, obviously their season was cut short on the same day that Red Bull surpassed the budget cap?
It brings up a whole new discussion of why are women not getting the same kind of funding. Of course, W Series is a feeder series, and there's no way it's going to be on the same level of it as F1, because that's not what it's there for. It's there to give these women, and because some of them like are still young, like young girls, which is like crazy because I could never imagine doing anything like that at that age. They're there to give these women seat time and the experience to build up to F1. And really, like, the money, it's a tough discussion to have, because we've seen it before, even for like, you know, like Oscar Piastri not getting his F1 seat because of money. And I spoke to Jamie last year, and we kind of had this discussion about how it's not totally just like an issue for women. Like, the funding and money in motorsport is like a universal issue. But the fact that something which is so empowering at its core is kind of being pushed to the side when Red Bull was spending however much over their budget, it was like...
What are your thoughts though then on the Drivers Academy being launched, and how that kind of sits next to the W Series, considering that some people have argued, well, it seems that the Drivers Academy is more integrated into F1 structure. Why would they not have just kind of doubled down on the W Series or expanding that concept?
I've had this conversation with someone before, and I was like, there shouldn't be any sort of competition between W Series and F1 Academy, because fundamentally they are the same thing. They're there to empower young women and help them get on that ladder, which would lead to Formula One, like I've just said. And it's like, well, why can't there be some sort of like collaboration or whatever it might be? Like, W Series could have been on that FIA ladder in the same way that F3 is and F2 is. And I know obviously people might argue that and be like, but it's just for women. Yes, it's just for women because women need that space. Like, but the fact that like we have teams who also race in F2 and F3 are in F1 Academy, that I think that's a really good thing, because
absolutely,
it was mean that they have the opportunity to progress into those teams too.
Yeah, but also build relationships with the
Exactly.
teams. I think at the end of the day, it's a small circle. You want to be exposed to those race engineers, to the back end team. Like, that's such a big part. Like you said, like F1 is so much more than a driver, and like there's so much going on. You need to be exposed to that and build those relationships.
That's like, there's nothing to say that a couple of years in F1 Academy could lead to these sorts of opportunities for other women. It's all about the opportunities, really. Like, if the opportunity is there, then at least that's something. And then it's from there where we can build on.
What have you seen as like some of the most impactful solutions that you think have made a difference so far?
Well, I think since like I kind of got into F1, I feel like there are so many more opportunities for women now, which is obviously a massive positive. I'm not saying that it's like perfect, because it's not. We all know that it's not perfect, and that the levels of like equality in terms of, it's not a 50-50 like split between we've got loads of men and we've got loads of women. We've got these initiatives like Girls on Track, who obviously do so much and partner up with like Formula E races in different locations and things, which that's really cool, because some people might have never been exposed to that as a potential pathway. Like, I know from being obviously like in the north, we don't really have like motorsport kind of opportunities here. You know, like Mercedes on like working from like a factory in Newcastle. Like, that's not happening. I don't think if I hadn't got into F1 in the way I did, then I probably would never have been exposed as a career path either. But I think a lot of the barriers are like the preconceptions and the ideas and perspectives that people have had for so many years. I feel like there's been such a big shift in who watches it in terms of like men and women. And younger fans, like we discussed before, younger fans coming in with Drive to Survive have more of an open mind about, you know, the possibilities in the sport in terms of who's watching it, who might want to go and work in it, and that they're bringing the conversation to places like Twitter. And for me, it's having those discussions online is like so important. I think that's like one of the most important ways people can break those barriers and those preconceptions of, you know, F1 is a man's world, because it's not anymore. Things like this, like these kind of initiatives, just like two women just having a conversation about something that they're both passionate about. How common would that have been like however many decades ago?
Absolutely. Who inspires you? Like, who do you think is doing some really cool things that you're like, you know what, you're making a really profound impact?
The first female in the industry that I spoke to for my own site was Liz Brooks, who is the director of strategic communications at Maserati MSG Racing in Formula E.
Amazing.
And we had a conversation a while ago now just about how she kind of got into it and you know what she kind of does now. Their team is so amazing in terms of their values and everything, and I've been working with them recently as well. And Lizzie's just like, she's like my little hype woman. I look up to her and I just think like everything she's doing and everything that she's doing to kind of further the team and how that whole team kind of works. I'm not going to say too much because I have a piece coming out, so I'm not going to.
No, absolutely. Let's prequel that now, just so everyone knows. This piece is coming out
now. Anna Bravo is another one. I spoke to her just before she kind of started with F1 full time.
Yeah.
And it was when she was just doing like, she talked about just finishing a full time 9-to-5 job to move into F1. And she only started out like doing what she's doing as a passion project. So it's very much like the kind of trajectory that I've kind of taken. So speaking to her and seeing everything that she's doing now, again, amazing. She's so lovely as well. There's Lissie Mackintosh, obviously, who's like just everything's just kicked off for her and she's doing amazing things. And I feel so like lucky to have spoken to them or kind of worked with them in some capacity.
And how do you think you feel about your future now and everything that you could go on to achieve in light of speaking to all these inspiring men and women, and like, how has that opened your mind as to what's next?
So my degree is obviously very communications based, very media based. So I'm going to be doing a postgraduate degree like next year in international sport management, which will cover more like of a management kind of look.
That's insane.
Marketing, event management, all that kind of thing. And I've said to a lot of people now, like that might open so many more doors for me. And that's part of the reason why I want to do it. Because I've got the communications background and I have like the journalism side of things. But what happens if this time in a year like event management is something that I want to go into. And I think with F1, there are so many potential options for a career that you can't necessarily close yourself off. I mean, that's just how I see it. I mean, right now my end goal is like to work in communications in an F1 team. But how I get there, it might not be like a linear pathway. But
I think that's the message, right? Like anyone listen, and I wish there was someone like you when I was at uni doing law. Like, you can do both and you can start whatever you want. Like, there's literally, you can do anything. And I think your story, like, you can create your own experience. You can create your own, I mean, God, to a point, you're an entrepreneur and you might not think that, but I'm like, this is a female entrepreneur. Like, you've just built these connections. You've built a product. You talk about F1. Like, people read your stuff. Pieces have got 10,000 views. Like, all at the age of like, it's, you know, so for anyone that is listening that is kind of facing that time of uncertainty, I mean, see this as like an opportunity more than something to worry about, because look at everything you've done.
And that's kind of the beauty of this like day and age and how technology is now. You can just find something that you're interested in, and whether it be making videos for TikTok, whether it be writing, whether it be creating social graphic. Do you know what I mean? There are so many options. And in the F1 industry, there's always going to be a need for people who can write, people who can design, and now people who can create these TikToks and this kind of content. But I think it probably goes for other industries as well. Like, when people are like, why are you studying media? Like, I'm like, you don't realise that everything you do, everything you consume is media.
I mean, Drive to Survive is probably the simplest example. Like, look, F1 6 years ago, cars going around in a circle. Obviously, that is more than that. But F1 now, same thing. What has changed? The distribution and the brand building of how people understand sport. That is the power of brand, of media. And that's the power of storytelling as well. So my final question, if there was like one thing you want everyone to take away from speaking today about like what you've experienced and what you've achieved, what do you think that is?
If you have a passion, you have to like run with it. You have to find your voice. You have to find something that, whether it be making TikToks, whether it be writing, whatever it might be. And that it goes for any industry as well. Like, obviously it's not just motorsport specific, but you just like, well, I know from what I've done, like I found something that I was passionate about. I found a style. I found kind of like how I like to approach things, and I just went with it. But if you're creative and if you're passionate about something, and it comes down to creativity for you, you have to just run with it, because like you never know what opportunity, like you never know what email might land in your inbox after you've been doing things for a few months. Say yes to every opportunity as well. I don't think there's been an opportunity that I've said no, because like in this industry, it's like really competitive now. So, and even if it's an opportunity that, you know, like when we first spoke, it was like we couldn't sit down like the day after you first reached out. You know, it's taken a while. It's like a work in progress, right?
Absolutely.
But at least like you say yes to the opportunity and you sit down and you get to have these conversations, or you get to be creative or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that's how the opportunities come about. But then also these conversations are the ones that could empower other people.
Yeah. Which will just go and do it.
Just as important.
I think that was a great note to end this on. Ellie, thank you so much for...
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.